Sometimes when we create something that we're proud of, something that gives us a sense of true satisfaction, that feeling is immediately followed by wondering what people will think about it. And in that moment where we start to seek validation, where we start to wonder what other people will think about our work, it pulls us down from the high vibration that allows us to enjoy what we've created and continue to show up at our best. There's a part of us that still gets caught up in wanting validation from others in order to legitimize how we felt in creating what we created. In this episode, we explore how to start noticing when we're seeking validation from others for our work, how validation seeking can interfere with our ability to show up at our best, and the difference between validation and feedback. Here we go. Hey, welcome to the Workday Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Drew Amoroso. Every workday we encounter dozens of situations that we have to navigate in order to have a successful and productive workday. And the way you choose to think through those situations helps shape not only the kind of day you have, but the trajectory of your career. This podcast is all about helping you to navigate those situations, show up at your best, and be happier at work. I'd like to take a look at what I see as our tendency to sometimes fall into the mindset of thinking and believing that the work that we do is not important. So at a very high level, we should start out by saying that people are impacted every day by the efforts that we make, by what we say, and by the way we conduct ourselves. The challenge, though, is that because we each live in our own body and mind and experience every day, we can't see the strength of the impact we have on the people around us. So we're not able to see how the things that we do impact and influence other people. We almost never can know how big of an impact we're making because it's not something that we can easily quantify or easily see. And one of the reasons it's so hard to measure the strength of something like that is because many people don't tell us how much what we're doing is influencing or helping them. So in other words, even though our work may be changing the lives of the people around us and influencing them in ways that we can't even understand, that feedback may never reach us for one reason or another. So I want you to call to mind a time when you thought that you did a stellar job at something. So maybe you went above and beyond for someone, created what you thought was an excellent piece of work, or did something that had the potential to really help someone else out. And when you created that thing, you had this welling up inside of you, right? This feeling that what you were doing really was hitting the mark, and you felt like it was your best work, or you felt like it was the best expression of you, or that it was created while you were in a flow. So call to mind a time like this and think about how good that felt, right? In moments like that, I think it's a signal that the work that we're doing or something that we've created is in alignment with who we are, right? Like we've hit a pocket of genius or a sweet spot, and it feels great to be in that moment. And sometimes when we have moments like this, we end up expecting to receive some praise or some acknowledgement that confirms what we felt during the process of creating it, right? So in other words, we had this elevated feeling of creating something, and because we experienced it, we expect other people to notice it too. And we also have an expectation, or at least a desire, that they will tell us that they noticed it and that they appreciated what it was that we did, and they saw it for what it was. So let me give you an example from my day-to-day. So each week, I spend time preparing this podcast, and I publish blog posts, I put on presentations, and I have a weekly show called 11 at 11. And sometimes I'll have a moment of creativity where I feel like I've just done the absolute best I can to explain a concept that I want to convey. Or I'm really happy with how I turned what I thought was a challenging subject or a topic into something that was valuable but also easy to understand at the same time. And when those moments happen, I have a feeling of true satisfaction, right? And there's a sense of excitement that comes with that moment and with having created something new. But sometimes after I reach that high point and that moment of satisfaction, I have a feeling that immediately follows it where I wonder what people will think about it, whether what I said will resonate with them, whether it'll make sense, whether they'll see and understand the thought and the effort that I put into crafting something that I took so much pride and care in crafting. In other words, I'm seeking validation. And in that moment where I start to seek validation, where I start to wonder what other people will think about my work, it pulls me down from that high vibration that allows me to enjoy and celebrate what I've created, and that helps me continue to show up at my best, right? It pulls me away from this elevated state I was living at, because even though I was excited about what I produced, there's a part of me that still gets caught up in wanting validation from others in order to legitimize how I felt in creating what I created. And so first, I just want to draw your attention to this thing that we can get caught up in experiencing, which is the sense of wanting validation from other people to confirm what we think about the quality and the valuableness of the work that we do. There's a second aspect here that I want to draw your attention to also. Layered on top, nicely layered on top of our desire for validation is our tendency to take the lack of responses from people who we show our work to, or who we go out of our way for, or who we tried so hard to help. We tend to take their lack of affirmation around our work and what we've created as a confirmation that what we did wasn't as good as we thought. So when we don't hear words of approval, when we don't get the reaction that we want, when we don't feel like someone comprehends the effort that we put into creating something, we can feel like our efforts were for nothing, or that no one is listening, or that no one is noticing, or that we didn't do as good a job as we thought that we did when we were creating this thing in the moment. This kind of validation seeking, where we essentially tamp down the excitement that we feel until someone agrees with us, that can rob us of the ability to really celebrate what we know was an expression of us being in a sweet spot, or in our element, or in our zone of genius. And if we're constantly judging the value of our contributions based on what other people say, then we're missing out on the intrinsic value that comes from creating something that is uniquely in our vision. But we have to remember that just because we aren't receiving direct affirmations, that doesn't mean that our work isn't impactful. We have what I would call silent benefactors that are all around us, whose lives are impacted each and every day by the work that we do. So our efforts day to day create a ripple effect that's really hard to appreciate or to quantify, but that reaches far outside of our immediate awareness. So, of course, it would be great to see and hear the results of our efforts in real time, but if we're not regularly getting that feedback, it doesn't necessarily mean that our work isn't valuable or that it's going unnoticed. It just means that we're not receiving any feedback. So I want to give you a way to translate this into your day-to-day, and I'd like to do that by giving you two things to think about that are in line with this concept of silent benefactors and seeking validation. First, the next time you have a moment where you've put out a lot of effort and you've used your own creative genius to create something in your day, and you felt like you created it from a place of total alignment, but you feel like the value of your work isn't getting through to other people, I want you to take a moment to reconsider that assumption. So I want you to consider the possibility that you probably are impacting lots of people around you through your work, but they may just not be relaying that message to you. And as a way to think about this, I want you to consider how often you have been impacted by someone's work or their words or something they said, and how even though you appreciated it or benefited from it, that appreciation wasn't communicated to that person for one reason or another. So I can think of plenty of times when I've been the recipient of someone's hard work or their creativity or their advice, and because I was so caught up in my own reality and my own stuff in that moment, it didn't even cross my mind until later to acknowledge them or thank them in a more formal way. So I think we can look to our own experience for an understanding that we are likely impacting so many more people around us than we think. But because each of us processes and responds to information differently, the importance of what we've done for them just may not get communicated to us for one reason or another. The second and related takeaway is to remember that feedback is different from validation. So when we put our work or our own message out into the world, it's great to seek feedback because feedback allows us to continue to refine what we do in a way that will allow us to help more people and therefore make our work even more impactful. But feedback is different from validation. Validation is the act of seeking approval of who we are. It's asking people to confirm that we and our message and our work and our beliefs are intrinsically valuable. It's asking people to basically confirm that our opinions are valid or have meaning. And when we look for validation, we end up tamping down who we are and the genius that we bring to the things that we do. And when we engage in this tamping down, we can't ever fully show up as the best version of ourselves. And it forces us to hide away some of our genius because we're fearful that people may not approve. So I want you to take a second to just notice the difference between feedback and validation. Feedback is great because it's the act of wanting to constantly refine and improve upon what you do. But at its core, seeking feedback is not an attempt to validate your work. Feedback is a refinement of your unique abilities, but validation is about looking for something outside of yourself to feel whole. So, as you move through your day, if you catch yourself seeking validation, take a moment to remember the difference and try to steer yourself towards seeking feedback instead. If you aren't hearing anything from people about your work, it's okay to ask them what they think and for their opinion, and we should be using that information as a refinement of the work that we create. Feedback is a golden opportunity to improve, and it's very valuable information. But remember to not take the feedback that you receive as a commentary on who you are, what you create, or your innate abilities. Go have a great workday. Hey, thanks for listening to this episode of the Workday Mindset Podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, I'd appreciate it if you could head over to whatever service you're using to tune in and give us a 5-star review. The Workday Mindset Podcast is a collaboration with Populous Radio. Check out their other shows at populousradio.com. Thanks for tuning in, and go get them.